Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to take a little look at and explore the question, has the deep state cancelling and censorship propaganda wing or arm been in control of Twitter's policies, and again, in regard to cancelling and censorship and so on, for quite some time. So certainly since it became obvious that Donald Trump was going to be was the Republican presidential candidate in 2016, and that the polls were suggesting he was looking pretty good to win. That if it was going earlier, it was a more passive version of censorship and cancelling, just sort of steering the narrative in a certain direction, but doing it sort of not as obviously as it became. But certainly, I noticed back then, and by the way, in 2016, I didn't think Mr. Trump had much of a chance. I thought, given the coverage was extremely pro-Hillary, I thought that she would win, but I underestimated the feeling that so many people had, that when they did have an alternative to the globalist candidate, they would vote for that candidate, that alternative. And I think the same holds true today, probably all over the Western world. I would think it's only the media propaganda control and the globalist controlled candidates that prevents the public from doing that, which of course is election interference on a grand scale, in my view at least. But coming back to Twitter, now, since Mr. Musk has acquired Twitter, I've gone back and looked at a few of the interviews done by Jack Dorsey and Vijaya Gadde and some other of the Twitter heavies of the time, and also had a look at some of their posts and streams and some of the political positions they've taken. Now, there's no doubt that they were firmly in the globalist camp, and that the party that the globalists have total control over in the United States is the Democrats. So they were in the globalist Democrat camp, and there was no bones about that. So the idea they could be impartial was always in question in terms of the decisions they make regarding censorship and so on. But there was an interview, and I'm sure as many people have seen it, there's an interview, I think it was in 2019, where it was on the Joe Rogan show, or the Joe Rogan podcast. And Joe Rogan had invited Jack Dorsey, the then CEO of Twitter, and this Indian woman, Vijaya Gadde, who was the chief censor, or I think she called herself policy implementer or something like that. But and they were on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Tim Pool, who's got his own huge channel in the United States, Tim Pool, who does great work, by the way, was also there, and he was asking the hard questions. Now, Joe Rogan was more sort of the convener and was just giving the general architecture of the conversation. Tim Pool was asking the hard questions, and he did make a chase on some good questions there. And there was Dorsey and that Vijaya Gadde. Now, just on looking at reviewing some of the footage there and other interviews, Dorsey to me never came across as the CEO of the company. He was the front man, the money men and the political operatives and the goons in the back room were running it, and he was just the front man. And he'd do a good job of being a San Francisco sort of semi-hippie, and I've dropped a few joints, and I'm a really with it cool dude, and yeah, rah. So he never came across as a CEO. Now, I having been involved in business and international business for a long time, there's a certain sort of style that CEOs have. Maybe not the kids that cut some fantastic code and suddenly find themselves as CEOs when they're still 21 or something, but Dorsey had been around long enough, and to me, he didn't display any of the typical behaviours of a CEO or somebody who was in control of making decisions. He indicated, to me at least, this is my view, he indicated a lot of behaviour suggesting that he was sort of in a boat being carried along by the tide, and his little spiel was to make it all look legit. That came across, and I've again met people like that. But also when you look at that Vijaya woman and Dorsey in the same room, at the interview or in other situations, it never looked like he was her boss. Now maybe Mr. Dorsey was the sort of guy who would just turn up at the meetings and go, "I hate Hitler," and everyone go, "Yeah, Donald Trump is a fascist, yeah." Maybe it was all rah. And he could sort of do his Bob Marley act, maybe sing "I Shot the Sheriff" or something like that to the employees, but he never demonstrated that he came across as a CEO. But also it wasn't clear, certainly in interactions that I saw, that she did not report to him. He was not her boss. Her boss was somewhere else. She reported to other people or other, reported in other directions, not to him. And that was the relationship, certainly as I saw it. And I've seen those sort of relations, particularly where you're dealing with an alleged CEO who's really just a front man, just a stuffed shirt, and the VP or something in a company has been appointed by the big banks. There's maybe a consortium of financiers, and they've put their stooge in there to do what they want, whatever that might be. And so that person reports into their bosses in the financial companies and doesn't actually report to the CEO. And the CEO tolerates that because they're given a few things to do. They're given lots of nice Krispy Kreme donuts at breakfast time, or so they get their benefits, their salary, and they get lauded in the media as being high-powered business people. But in reality, they're just flunkies and stooges, just passengers on the fucking train as it goes along. So it was clear, in my view, she did not report to him. And he was the CEO. So now there's no one between her and the CEO that was there. So in my opinion, that was fairly clear that she already was reporting to the deep state. The deep state already was saying, you're our Nina Jankowicz. You're our Nina Jankowicz inside Twitter. You're going to be our controller of information. You're going to make sure the conservative voices are either emasculated, deboosted, or cancelled. And that the leftist pro-globalist Democrat voices are not deboosted, are not cancelled, are not limited, that they get full voice, and all other views and all other people are suppressed or limited in some way. Now, when you look at the people that Twitter was cancelling or removing, deboosting, cutting off their tweets for 7 days or whatever, then shadow banning and so on. When you look at that, I mean, there were a few leftist type ones, but only if there was an absolute furor. Otherwise, those left pro-globalist leftist Democrat voices were allowed up. But the slightest transgression by people on the other side, the anti-globalist or the pro-Republican or whatever you want to call it, pro-MAGA Republican people, or even people that were just questioning the globalist position on matters then, or the deep state and the globalists then those people were being cancelled. So that was so one-sided, the cancellation policy, that it was beyond. You couldn't deny it. But I was watching sort of that Vijaya Gandhi answer the questions, and Tim Poole asked some pretty good questions. I mean, he gave some really topical, really relevant stuff. He came quite well prepared, and I was, if you look at the way she behaves here. Now, mate, remember, she's no genius or anything. She hasn't achieved anything in her own life, in my opinion, and she's effortlessly. You can tell that she knows she will never be held, in her view at the time, she will never be held accountable or responsible. She's got powerful people backing her, and she's never going to have to worry about having to explain herself or be responsible or accountable for her actions. Now, whether she believes she's morally in the right or something, that's sort of slightly academic, but she's got that confidence of someone who knows they will never be held accountable and will never have to explain or justify and doesn't have to, what she's doing or what she's done, which includes, I don't know if it was at the time, but I think it was a little bit later, but taking a sitting elected president of the United States off the social media platform. Now, that to me clearly was a deep state instruction. Get that guy off the fucking platform. He's making too much. He's opposing us. He's exposing our magical curation of millions of votes. This sort of thing. You've got to get him the fuck off the platform. Do it now. Say he take. Anyone would have balked at that. A sitting elected president. We don't give a fuck. We're the deep state. We fucking decide what the narrative is, and you're our stooge in there. You do what the fuck we tell you. Well, what excuse? What excuse can I use? We'll just say he transgressed the policies. It's just that's going to have to do. Just get him the fuck off now. We're telling you. So that no, I don't think she would have been hard to convince. I think she would have quite eagerly done it. But nonetheless. It certainly comes across to me that she was a deep state, if not employee, an extension of the deep state. Again, the Nina Jankowicz type thing, and her job was to emasculate any voices that weren't pro-democrat, pro-globalist, deny the deep state exists, all those sorts of things. That was her job to do that, and I think there's a person like that in every one of the social media platforms, because the deep state, the globalist deep state, they control all the mainstream media. If it isn't for a few voices like Tucker Carlson and that sort of thing, there'd be 100% control by the deep state and by the globalists of the entire media narrative. The only thing they can't control, because it's too widely dispersed across individuals in their lounge rooms and in their kitchens, whatever, making videos, like this one. So because they don't have that control, they then have to embed censors within the platform to stop all these voices from being heard or from making videos or whatever. So they had to do the censorship in a slightly different way. They just don't control the whole thing as they do with the mainstream media. So they have to embed censors within these organizations. Just magically happen to be, 95% of their censorship just happens to be, non-globalist voices. And they every now and again they'll do they'll limit a few of the flunkies and stooges on the left that are irrelevant voices anyway. Now, one of the things with Mr. Musk acquiring Twitter is that if the censorship is applied even-handedly, that any transgression, regardless of what the policies are, by the way, any transgression is going to be, they're going to be cancelled, or their accounts deleted, or their videos or their tweets, put on hold for 7 days or something like that. If that's applied absolutely evenly across the board, then the pro-globalist people will be screaming, because not only do they emasculate the non-globalist voices, but the pro-globalist voices have been heavily promoted so that they always get star billing. So if that censorship regime is applied evenly across the board, then the vast majority of those left-wing globalist tweets. I mean, look at all the hate that's poured on white people, straight white people. I mean, it's vitriol. It's astonishing, and yet those tweets never get taken down. So if this is applied evenly, that in itself will be a game changer. The other thing too is the fact checking. The people on the pro-globalist left can say the most outrageous lies, and they're not fact checked. Whereas the people, the anti-globalists, the Republicans, or people who question globalization, they're fact checked. They're very tightly and narrowly and aggressively fact checked. Which then allows them to be either emasculated completely, or their information called into question. So this is we're looking at some big changes there, even just on the basis of that. The even-handed cancel and deletion and put in stasis for 7-day type policy. If that's applied evenly, it'll be in itself will be a huge game changer. But I don't think the globalists are really going to allow that. They've either got to make sure Musk does what they want, or they'll try and bring him down in some way. Having said that, he's a rich man. He's no slouch. If they want to come after him, then he's a guy who's capable of fighting back. They know that. So that's why I think they'll try things like the Secrets Act or National Security Act. They'll try methods where they can take him out of proper courts of law and drag him into kangaroo courts, and I think they'll try that as a method, and they probably more than anything want to bring him to heel, bring Mr. Musk to heel, so that they just want to threaten him with dire consequences of all sorts of terrible things. We can either have that, Dante's Inferno, or we can do what the fuck we want. I mean, you got one or the other, buddy, and that's a plea bargain type approach. But again, I don't think Mr. Musk is someone who's going to take kindly to being pistol whipped and slapped around in public like that. So it could be an interesting stash, and with what appears to be, at least in the midterms, that the Democrats are going to lose all their majorities and all their chairmanships of committees and that sort of thing, then their ability to prosecute and chase after and victimize people they don't like is going to be substantially reduced. Not removed entirely, but substantially reduced. A lot of deep state operatives in the FBI that can go after him, that sort of thing. But that's it. But you have a look at that Joe Rogan video where he's interviewing with Tim Pool, interviewing Jack Dorsey and Vijaya Gadde. The way she just effortlessly swats the question. Tim asks some hard questions, and she's, oh well, we're learning. Hey. But Tim says, well, hey, it seems your deletions and all that thing go well one way. Oh, we're learning. Now, just a few things, and I noticed this, and it's something that's an architecture of approach and attitude and values that are probably worth noting, because you're seeing it in the wider space of social media. There's a few things that this Vijaya kept coming back to, and she was trying to just sidestep really the point that Tim was making and just denying responsibility. We can't do it. There's too many. We've only got time to chase after and delete right wing stuff. We don't have time to do anything else. I mean, that in itself is an admission that it's hardly a balanced process. But she talks about we have to control behaviour. Now, that's very much a sort of a school mom type sort of attitude of controlling behaviour. She's the school mom controlling all these little kids who are running around, and they have to be told what to do and say, and wash their hands after they've been to the toilet, and all this sort of thing. And she's going to be the one that dictates that. Now, she talks about behaviour, as in the behaviour of people who are placing tweets. Now, I sort of struggled a little bit with that, because how can the behaviour is exactly what do you mean by that? Why is it if a white person says something bad about a non-white person, that's bad, but if a non-white person says something, seriously unpleasant and possibly dangerous about a white person, then it is acceptable. So then it came, and then she talked about, well, it's not just behaviour, we have to look at the intent. Now, this is where it got interesting, because this Vijaya woman, she claims to be able to assume intent. So if it's a straight white male, then the intent is obviously bad. I mean, we don't need to know anything else. So straight away, the ideology comes in. There's no facts, there's no evidence, there's no balance, there's no let's apply the rules equally. It's nothing like that. He's a straight white. I mean, she didn't say this, but the inference is, we assume intent. We assume intent because you can't measure it. You don't know what the intent is. We assume intent. So the intent of the person that places the tweet, for example, if they're a straight white male, then their intent is to be a fucking Nazi, and we're just cancelling. We're not cancelling accounts or tweets. We're cancelling Nazis. So the intent is assumed. Now, if it's a black lesbian with one leg, the proverbial black lesbian with one leg, and they say something terrible about white people, go and kill all white people or something, then that intent, that the intent there is actually good because they're fighting back against Nazis, and that's a good intent. And also they're just sticking up for themselves, defending themselves against all the Nazis. And these Nazis are everywhere, as we all know. It's a Nazi society. Nazis everywhere. Nazis. I mean, Hitler just went out the back door just a second ago. I mean, that's how many Nazis are around. So there's this ideological assumption of intent. Now, using that was particularly the trigger point that I picked up, was that we can assume intent along ideological lines. On that basis, we can then cancel this tweet or deboost this or do that or so, even though the terms of service have not been transgressed. We can just assume wicked evil intent on the basis of ideology and the totem pole of victimhood. Now, within that, which rolls in with the intent, is the concept of social power. So straight white male has all the social power. I mean, certainly not in the Western world today. Anyone who thinks that's a fucking lunatic. But social power is assumed to be in place. Therefore, removing tweets or deleting and cancel culture generally rolls back into this intent that someone who posts a tweet who has limited social power may be a Mexican homosexual. Now, that Mexican homosexual may be extremely rich, may have millions of followers, may get all sorts of accolades from the activist community. But because they're homosexual Mexican, they're Latino, they're still given marks or given benefits because of their reduced social power. Whereas the straight white male in the bones of his ass, living somewhere in rural wherever, he's still got shitloads of social power. He's probably Hitler as well, by the way. And therefore, we should cancel that guy because of his social power that we have ideologically determined. Now, if he's got social power, then his intent is obviously the same as Hitler. So we can then take him off. Now, the other point that she made was we view this through the lens of. We view that through the lens of. So they very much again, she was saying of this because it's not a defined term, which means it's legally defensible insofar as there is no terminology that's absolutely defined. So she made this kind about through the lens of this or that purpose. So we've got a white straight white male with social power, therefore their intent is bad, and therefore their purpose, the purpose of their post or their tweet, is to do bad things. Therefore, we're entitled to take it down because they're a fucking Nazi. So each one of these little ideological sort of chimeras, tricks, all rolled into one or rolled into each other and became one. But the end point was always the same: straight white male, evil, bad, Hitler, fascist, Nazi. Anyone else, good, oppressed, beautiful, must be allowed a voice. They have to be allowed to speak and fight back against all the Nazis. So it's an insane thing. But there you've got somebody controlled by the deep state who's simple and stupid, in my view, simple and stupid enough to ideologically chase after these things and believe they're doing some sort of incredible moral good. And also having people in Twitter who would carry out these things without so much as batting an eyelid. But if you look at just how many horrible, mean, insane posts were made that were anti-white people and that were never taken down, calling for the death of Tim Pool, for goodness sakes. They weren't taken down, but you misgender a transgender someone and bang, they're onto it. So this is very clearly a way of, putting cattle, into the pen and feeding them information and herding them in this and that direction. And I believe, I would suggest, and this is a serious question, that Vijaya Gada never reported to Dorsey. She reported, in fact, to her globalist deep state censorship masters and did their bidding. And I would suggest that's been around probably since Donald Trump became the candidate, the Republican candidate for president in 2016. And it's gone on since then. And if anything, it's picked up speed and become more intense as the globalists have desperately tried to control and exercise more control over the entire narrative that the public gets to hear. You've been Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.